My name's Chris Golder. I wrote something that's going to be in Beyond Words Press collection. It's My Greatest Fear is the name of the collection. It's available in January. The name of the piece that I will be reading today is called Frank Dunabe, the Extraterrestrial Tapeworm That Lives in My Stomach. I swallowed a live Dunabe worm, and now it's growing in my stomach. His name is Frank, and I can't be altogether certain of it, but I think he's atheist. I could author a rather meaty self-help book on the dangers of engaging in a theological argument with a flesh-eating parasite, but the first thing Frank would have me tell you is that he doesn't consider himself a parasite by our definition. He calls himself a parasite, which was the first indication that Frank's sense of humor is either lackluster or it doesn't translate very well in my head. Frank doesn't consider himself a flesh-eater, and I tend to agree. Unlike the cherub cylinder botfly found on the sixth moon of Titanus, which burrows its way through your epidermis and feasts on your fat stores and gnaws away at your muscle fibers and tendons until you're too weak to live, Dunabe worms simply harvest your dead cells, bile, and free radicals. Frank would want me to tell you that he is on his worst day a pessimistic old fool, and on his best day, the greatest weight loss partner I've ever had. And I would be forced to agree simply because my appetite's ferocious and I look as thin as the day I graduated high school. It's like I've tapped into a source of unbridled metabolism. I'm only low energy if I don't eat, and Frank usually nags me half to death before I miss a snack. The Dunabe worms are typically accepting of all walks of life, but they are a bit prejudiced when it comes to those botflies from Titanus. I really tried to figure out why they hate them, but Frank doesn't like to talk about it. Whenever I ask him to tell me more about the history between their two races, I tend to immediately develop a large knot in my stomach. I can't tell in those moments if I'm hurting Frank or if Frank's hurting me, and it's best for both of us if I change the subject. You're probably wondering how on earth an extraterrestrial ends up with the name Frank. It's simple. Frank's real name is virtually unpronounceable. It follows with a range of glottal sounds to which we have no direct translation in our alphabet. I hear it in my head when he says it, but he knows the absence of the letters causes me pain, and he's sympathetic to the miscommunication, so he said I can call him Frank. It's a result of a memory we shared about my fourth grade teacher, Mr. Franklin. He was a dreadful teacher. He made several children cry in the classroom on account of his inability to properly instruct us on even the simplest lesson plans. He left halfway through the school year, and Mrs. Braun, the interim teacher, said he moved. I found out later he was fired and replaced. Why Frank and not Mr. Frank? Well, Frank didn't like the formality of the full name Franklin. Upon his arrival, he had not yet understood the difference between our first and last names, and so he asked me to call him Frank. His gesture was actually rather intimate. We've talked about the subject over countless meals together. The human body releases chemicals when recollecting various memories, which in turn affect body functions, especially gut health. He experiences my joy, my sorrow, my excitement, and in a way his experience of my memories is deeply profound for him. In his naivety, Frank hadn't realized he was asking to be named after a person who caused me a great deal of stress. He simply felt the anxiousness I experienced when trying to understand his real name and likened it to how I felt when struggling through Mr. Franklin's fourth grade class. Frank's heart's always in the right place. You might still be wondering why Frank is atheist and how I know this so intimately. Well, it's a strange relationship between us. I get the best read on him while he's feeding, right after I eat. Imagine a fast-acting pill. When ingested, the medicine releases a warm sense of two old friends catching up over a hearty, delicious dinner. Not only does Frank inadvertently project his emotions to me during a feeding, but these sensations also become far more surreal the longer he stays in my body. He shares his greatest fears with me now, typically after suicide wings, which we both crave regardless of how it debilitates our senses. His ultimate fear? Being buried alive in the rotting carcass of a Volitian Noxosaurus because of the visceral nerve damage caused by their decaying stink sacs. Frank's crippling anxiety resulting from this fear is only topped in a hypothetical situation where Frank is also found naked at the time of death. Dunabe worms don't wear clothes, so he has my insecurities to thank for this additional fear, since he receives my emotions when he feeds too. His second greatest fear, of course, would be dying alone. I feel honored knowing his third greatest fear. He worries greatly that he may accidentally feed on me for too long and cause me to expire. It's Frank's way of describing death. I'm not too thrilled about being compared to other food labels, but he doesn't mean it in the same way we would when we say expired. He believes all life merely supports itself in two primary states of feeding: energy transferred through eating or being eaten. The energy absorption he needs to survive doesn't occur at a necessary rate should he feed off something that was dead. Moreover, he struggles deeply with my mortality, as even the sweet taste of my last birthday cake caused within him a strange pang of condolence. My 31st birthday cake was a chocolate cake with a raspberry chocolate ganache. A bit rich, true. It's one of my all-time favorite flavors, but thanks to Frank, it tasted like a violent winter. I wonder if he would have the same reactions and thoughts had he burrowed his way into my chest cavity instead of my stomach. Since Dunabe worms are an endangered species, I've only ever interacted with Frank. I know as much about them as he tells me. He shared once how they can implant pretty much anywhere in any creature in any part of their body. It's been communicated galaxy-wide. The human stomach, especially the American stomach, has a perfect combination of acid production and sugar intake suitable for Dunabe worm growth and sustainability. Had Frank made his way into the stomach of, let's say, a Noxosaurus, he would be emulsified by the iron calipers in its stomach ovens, as Frank described it to me clear enough to actually repeat. I've learned a great deal from Frank, and among the several major perks of our friendship, I haven't experienced a single bout of acid reflux since he settled in. Now is a decent time to mention Frank doesn't technically live in my stomach. I suppose he did for a while, but it was during a period of acclimation to his new environment. He was able to comfortably settle down into my cystic duct, a little tube between my gallbladder and small intestines. He absorbs the flow of excess acids from one end and feeds on everything that pours into my intestines from my stomach. I think it's fascinating, but I could see why the science behind our friendship could be considered off-putting and unappetizing, and Frank doesn't really appreciate either, honestly. He did share he was heartbroken when he found out how many people carelessly have their gallbladders removed. He said it seems like such a wonderful landing spot for Dunabe worms. All this to say, Frank is atheist because he doesn't understand how his race is all but extinct on one side of the galaxy. Meanwhile, on Earth, our gallbladders, the perfect habitat for his people, are needlessly removed at the first sign of a minor digestive struggle. He doesn't believe an all-knowing, all-seeing God would execute such a poorly designed system. I tried to argue that perhaps he and I are a great example of how God works and that it's our responsibility to facilitate more of these human Dunabe worm relationships. But once Frank has an idea in my head, he can't let it go. The idea that such a dependent little thing could have such a large ego greatly amuses me. Where do you put it all? It's the recurring question I get from my grandparents, especially during the holiday season. I tell them every time, I have an alien in my stomach, to be frank with you. It never gets a laugh, and I keep saying it, which makes me think that Frank's sense of humor is rubbing off on me. I know you're concerned about me losing my individuality. Intrusive thoughts and unfiltered influence are some of the most dangerous things of all to an impressionable mind like mine. But think of any close friend who doesn't change your mind from time to time. What about social media feeds, that alter the way you view the world? Haven't you noticed your taste in videos changing slowly over time? Social media feeds run on algorithms. How can you tell if you're teaching an algorithm or if an algorithm's teaching you? Is it augmenting your individuality or steering you towards some designed intention? Anyway, I often catch myself defending Frank, and I apologize if it's overbearing. I suppose it's a matter of perspective, and I'm not here to politicize the adoption of Dunabe worms, although I feel cleaner and healthier than ever before. Frank would leave my body if I insisted. He has stayed with me long enough to adopt my sophomoric sense of humor. By that, I mean he knows the only safe exit is the least flattering way for both of us. We always land here on a Uranus joke. They're brand new to him. As a close friend, he would oblige me should I decide I don't want him anymore. I feel that would be a rather sad day for both of us. It's not a perfect arrangement. Having a second voice in my head triggers a cascade of insecure thoughts. Am I second-guessing myself, or is Frank disagreeing with me? I don't make big decisions on an empty stomach now. This helps. I get less sleep. I feel completely regenerated after only 5 hours. I Miss those long Saturday morning sleep-ins. I'm certain Frank augments my sleep too. My dreams are wonderful, but my nightmares are treacherous. I still have comically terrible dreams, like the ones where you wake up and you're still angry at the person in real life for what they did to you in the dream. One time, I had a dream. Frank told me in confidence that he hated strawberries. And what kind of a person hates strawberries? He felt the animosity for me right when I woke. And we didn't talk until after second dinner, which is an eternity for us. Recently, I had a vivid nightmare where Frank told me if I ever wanted to see my kids again, I needed to kill my neighbor. I don't have kids, but I had them in the dream, and I love them more than I love myself. I was also quite fond of my neighbors, of which I had well over 14 if you count the buildings on each side of my house, across the street, and then the people in each building. Frank told me it wasn't up to me to decide, and he only told me who to kill after much duress. He gnawed his way through my abdomen, protruding through my muscle, bursting through, laughing maniacally until I squeezed him back inside with my palm. He finally escaped my abdomen and went off to my neighbor's house, where instead of killing them, he settled into them, and they proceeded to eat Christmas dinner without inviting me. I wonder if these nightmares are mine or Frank's. Either way, they're usually forgotten by breakfast. This morning, we ran out of food at the house. Finally, after hours of Frank nagging me, I logged out of my work computer and jumped in my car. I drove to the grocery store and loaded up on the usual items. The last few months, I've developed an unusual taste for powdered donuts, sweet Hawaiian rolls, and cheese from the can. I grabbed these craving-based items and stocked up on the normal supplies. I left the store, loaded up my trunk, and left the parking lot in a hurry. A few blocks from the market, a man in a pickup truck ran a red light and crashed into my driver's side door. It disorients me, and when the world stops spinning darkness, I open my eyes and peel my face from the airbag. I hear a loud ringing in my ears. I see blood on the airbag, and I felt it coming from my left ear. I made a failed attempt at opening the door, which had been crunched permanently into place. I climbed my way out of the passenger side of the vehicle, and when I landed onto the grass, I could see the full scene of the accident. My car was hit so hard, it traveled up the embankment and out of the intersection. My groceries were strewn all over the street. On the grass, I leaned forward, and in a forceful heave, involuntarily vomited. 1, 2 nearly dry heaves. It looked like a collection of bile. I remembered I hadn't eaten breakfast yet, and I wasn't certain, but I had a feeling it was all from a concussion. I looked up, and the pickup truck was relatively unharmed. The front end was flattened, but the driver and his passenger were fine. My car was totaled, and I heard the other driver ask me if I was all right. He sounded faint, like the question was traveling from some distance. And as I checked myself, I felt a pain surging in my rib cage. I lifted my shirt and found a massive red welt covering the left half of my abdomen. I began to worry, not about myself, but because I couldn't hear Frank. I can't hear Frank.